Hello, seventh graders. Today we're going to continue our discussion of the Constitution and the period of time after the Constitutional Convention in which states will move to ratify or approve the Constitution and follow that up initially with the addition of the Bill of Rights. So Chapter 7, Section 4 is our section today, and it's titled Ratification and the Bill of Rights, the last section in Chapter 7 before we move on. Vocabulary terms that appear on this sheet, just one, the term amend, which means to change. The term amend means to change, and the term amend is going to be the formal name for changing the Constitution. In about 230 years of our nation's history operating under the Constitution has only been amended or changed 27 times. And we're going to talk in this section about the first 10 of those changes. The first 10 amendments are going to be called the Bill of Rights. So looking at the term amend, that is the first term that appears. There are 5 terms total in this study deck. The other 4 are the Federalists, Anti-Federalists, the Federalist Papers, and the term Bill of Rights. And we will look at each of those in this section today. First, let's look at our first paragraph, which is going to discuss the Constitution had to be approved by 9 of the 13 states before it could go into effect. We talked in class about this. Two-thirds under the Constitution of the states, 2/3 of the states, which amounted to 9 of 13, had to approve of the Constitution before it could go into effect. And in 1787 and in 1788, delegates from every state debated the Constitution. Supporters of the Constitution called themselves Federalists. And as we've discussed and seen in class, the Federalists favored a strong national government. On the other hand, were the Anti-Federalists. Anti, prefix meaning against. The Anti-Federalists, they thought the Constitution weakened the powers of the states far too much. And the Anti-Federalists also thought that it gave the president too much power. So the Anti-Federalists were against the Constitution as it was written at the convention, and they were concerned that it took away from the power of the individual states. Now, some Anti-Federalists agreed to accept the Constitution if a Citizens' Bill of Rights were added to it. One by one, states finally voted to accept and adopt the Constitution. Now, the framers, and we learned that the framers were the men who wrote the Constitution, the founding fathers. The framers of the Constitution had established a way to amend the document. And by 1789, James Madison followed through on his promise. He had prepared a list of 12 amendments that would serve as a Bill of Rights. Now, I say that he had fulfilled his promise. The Anti-Federalists wanted a Bill of Rights included in the Constitution. James Madison, a Federalist, was not really keen on adding a Bill of Rights, but in order to compromise with the Anti-Federalist and the Anti-Federalist states, James Madison agreed to write a Bill of Rights that would eventually be added to the Constitution. And by 1791, December of 1791, the states had approved the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And these amendments became known as the Bill of Rights. Some of these rights, and we're going to talk about these specifically and more in depth in class, some of these rights include freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and freedom of speech. The Bill of Rights protects citizens' individual rights. Let me restate that. The Bill of Rights protects citizens' individual rights, and the government cannot take away these rights. This is very, very important to understand. The Anti-Federalists wanted these rights specifically included in the Constitution because they wanted to make sure that our rights were written down and that our rights would be protected by government, because if our rights are written down it is much, much more difficult to violate and to abuse those rights if they are spelled out plainly and clearly and written down. So that is why the Bill of Rights was added, because Anti-Federalists wanted to make sure that government could not take away those rights. Taking a look at the chart on our worksheet today, the chart is titled the Bill of Rights, and it goes down starting with the First Amendment, and it gives us an idea of what each amendment addresses, how each amendment protects individual rights. For example, the First Amendment actually includes 5 specific protections: freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly to meet in groups, and the right to petition your government to fix or to address or to redress a grievance. Amendment 2 is the right to keep weapons, the right to bear arms. Amendment 3 addresses protection against being forced to quarter and feed soldiers in your home. Amendment 4 addresses freedom from unreasonable searches of homes and property. Amendments 5 through 8 address rights of citizens accused of crimes to have a fair trial. We'll talk about each of those individually. And Amendments 9 and 10 limit the powers of the federal government to those specifically granted in the Constitution. Amendments 9 and 10 limit the powers of the federal government to those specifically granted in the Constitution. Looking at our questions that appear at the bottom of the worksheet today, let's take a peek at the question based on the reading. Question 1 asks, what were the concerns of the Anti-Federalists? And again, you can find the answer to question 1 in the above reading. What were the concerns of the Anti-Federalists? Question 2 is going to be based on the chart we just went over, and question 2 asks, what is the Bill of Rights? What is the Bill of Rights collectively? It is the Bill of Rights, but what really is the Bill of Rights? It's the first 10 what. The first 10 what should be a helpful hint to the correct answer. When we resume, our next lesson in class is going to address the beginnings of Chapter 8, and we're going to talk about goals and principles. Goals and principles contained in our Constitution. Until then, 7th graders, we'll see you soon.